Hundreds of hours, thousands of games, millions of bullets, and a whole ton of fun, but also frustrations. This is probably a good way to resume the Season 1 of the finals. But what can we expect now for the future of the game? In this video, I will try to discuss in all transparency what needs to happen, what we hated, and what we loved about the game, to try to understand where the game is going. Without further ado, this is Captain, welcome to the video. The changes we need to see. Ranked matchmaking. This one had to be put on the absolute top of the list. Most players, if not all, are already tired of having to deal with the unfairness of an unranked matchmaking for the rank mode. Whether you are lower rank put in diamond matches or a higher rank forced to lead squads that are not ready for this level of gameplay, the cost of this choice is currently way too high. While this was surely put in place to accelerate matchmaking while the player base grew, we have already seen how negatively this has affected the entirety of the finals. It is very easy to consider that a good portion of the players who stopped playing this game left just for this reason. If Season 2 brings only one change, it will have to be this one. Heavy builds need a nerf. This point is for the general health of our favorite FPS. The finals needs to see a general balancing of the three different builds, and this will have to start with a real nerf of the heavy build class. If we look in details, they not only equalize the strong points of other classes, but also outrun them on so many more. They have access to one-shot squad-killing nukes at an alarming frequency. They have as many, if not more bullets, than any other gun per clip. They are the only ones to have access to not only one, but two extremely powerful shields. They have an entire array of explosives that will either one or two shot kill anybody. Their life is more than 2 times superior to a light build, etc. The only downside to all this is that they cannot crouch and run 15% slower. Something needs to change. Light build needs a rework. As it stands, the light build is limited to a sort of disruptive type of gameplay. They're extremely low HP and their available kit only gives them the possibility to close the gap on player once, sneak attack and pursue their escapes. Of course, high-level light builds will be proficient in these types of actions, giving them a sharper edge, but the concept remains the same. It is currently very difficult for a light build to synergize with the rest of his team. Each member of the squad will have to trust that the light build player is capable to outperform the enemies without counting on them. This ruins, for the most part, the concept of objective-centric approach that this game has. More automatic weapons. While some of the automatic weapons are currently sitting in the S tier of the weapons list of the finals, it is very strange to consider that this game currently only proposes 4 automatic weapons, with half of that in the medium class. FPS games have to have access to a wide array of guns. Because of this approach, the game relies on players using melee weapons like swords or throwing knives. The issue with that is that the balancing of these weapons is extremely complicated and will very easily bring frustration. The game needs more guns with automatic fire rates that can affect damage per bullet rather than damage per hit. Rework of slashing weapons. Let me take the example of the sword. As it stands, with the dash plus the raw damage it inflicts, 74 with a normal hit and 140 with a critical or charged hit, it is so strong that it can solo kill an entire squad or at least keep the focus on the player long enough that the 2 other enemies will have an open feast on your squad. But what can be done? Removing the dash would render the weapon useless. Lowering damage would need to find a perfect formula that would probably take months of patches to find, etc. The innovative concept of having secondary type of weapons as primary weapons is good, but very risky. Let's hope Embark has a plan. Text-based chat. This should come without saying or any explanation. Every online game needs, and usually has, a text-based chat to facilitate communications. While the reason for this choice was probably to simplify the creation of the cross-platform channels and to limit the necessity for chat moderation, it is now hindering the growth of the game. People need an option for quick communication, even if they do not possess a microphone. Anti-cheat measures. It is evident that all games suffer to some degree from cheaters, and the finals is no exception. That being said, as it currently stands, there is a lingering feeling that cheaters have it very easy in the finals. The reporting system feels very light and brings no feedback when and if a report ends up successful, giving the players the feeling that while they suffered throughout an entire game because of a cheater, he will always get away with it without any consequences. Embark has to make an official communication and take a stronger stance on this fight. Last second cash out over value. As it stands, a team can basically AFK for 95% of the game, launch a last minute push on the last objective, steal it at the last second, and finish first as a result. While I will agree that this is me over-exaggerating a little, it isn't normal that a last second capture has the same value, if not more, than 130 seconds defense. The value of the cash out needs to be divided into quarters, with each validated quarter bringing a portion of the total cash to the defending team. This would complexify the game and bring an additional layer of intensity that we would all enjoy instead of living the frustration of losing a match you have carried till the last minute. The changes we hope to see. More maps. While it is true that the maps in the finals are absolutely magnificent, vast, and with an unforeseen level of destructibility that can leave any proper FPS player's jaw smacked to the floor, and that each map does have events and variants that help avoid feeling bored or on repetition, the finals currently only has 4 maps. Players, after an entire season of discovery, will now know most of what each map has to offer and are already exploiting their secrets. To make sure the game remains fresh and interesting, Embark will have to add at least 1 or 2 maps for Season 2. Replay system. For a game that incurs this level of complexity and difficulty, it is currently mind-blowing that players have 0 options for replay. Again, and as mentioned in earlier videos, TheFinals is an all-rounder FPS with a very fast-paced and dynamic approach. To progress, realize their strengths and weaknesses, players need to have the possibility to look back on their games, point out their mistakes, and analyze them. If Embark wishes to bring the finals to the level of competitivity that it seems to be going for, this would be an amazing addition. Nerf nukes. Embark listens to their players, and they did nerf explosives repeatedly and lately the nukes themselves. But this is clearly not enough. To avoid rendering the concept of nukes to ashes, they decided to nerf the trajectory of canisters based on the weight applied to them. This means that the thrower will have less control over them on longer distances. While this was a nice start and idea, it doesn't really solve the issue. As it stands, only heavy builds have access to splash zone damage weapons that can practically kill an entire squad at once. This creates a strong feeling of unbalance and honestly is just a bad experience. No one likes to be killed without having the chance to fight back. More clarity into changes. This follows up closely with the previous point, so I will not go into too much details, but some of the patch notes they have released included modifications, patches, glitch corrections, and damage modifications that were not entirely specified or explained. A lot of game operates with some level of shadow to avoid conflicts with players, but Embark seems to want to let their community know that they are listening to player feedback. This sometimes feels a little counterproductive. More progression levels with free cosmetics. Embark has absolutely smashed it with their cosmetics and their approach to free loot. Firstly, from level 0 to 40, and later with the added 10 levels from 40 to 50. Players have had the surprise of enjoying level-based cosmetic unlocks for no charge at all. We can all agree that this amount of free loot is either very rare or quite unique to the finals. Sadly, once reaching the level 50, this does suddenly come to a halt and puts us back into the typical pay for skins approach. It would be amazing to see the maximum level raised to 1 or 200 and see periodic loot drops like in the first 50 levels. More joint events. While we saw the Smoking Guns event in Season 1 being topped by the first joint event of targeting $250 billion of cash out together, it is still feeling like a side of the game they have not exploited fully. Even in the case of this event, the way it was presented by Embark was that if we do reach this goal, we would get a mysterious surprise. Considering there is no active counter anywhere of the money that has been collected, it feels like no matter what results the players do, Embark will come at the end saying we succeeded it, giving us a cosmetic and then moving on. If we look at games like Helldivers, where such events are the core of the game, there is still a lot of space for improvement. More lore. This seems to be coming, so I will not expand too much. But Embark created a very unique and exciting world for the finals. The commentators' adaptive comments and the distinctive maps that we play on make us want to dive further into the world and what brought us players to fight each other off. The short videos that were added throughout Easter eggs or patch updates seems to indicate a level of corruption and complexity that we have only seen the tip of. Let's hope Season 2 brings us a lot more. More recompense for climbing the ladder. It will not change our lives or hold players longer in the game, but a points-based ladder means a lot of time invested in the game and a lot of efforts put into developing one's set skills to go higher in the ladder. As it stands, the final has very limited, not to say barely any recompense for climbing up the ranks. Even the diamond gun that players unlock once reaching diamonds is limited to one weapon for one class. This doesn't feel very good and could easily be ameliorated. What we hope won't ever change. Fast-paced, dynamic gameplay. With Battle Royales taking over most of the competitive scene and the overall game releases mostly being sequels of existing games, it is easy to say that the FPS genre has faced difficult times in the last few years. Then came the finals. With a refreshing take on how to execute rounds and face off different teams with a high focus on objective capturing and defending, the game has brought players fresh air and fresh experience on how to enjoy FPSs. Let us hope that Embark keeps up with releases, not only on patch notes and updates, but also in-game content to the level of what we have seen so far. Highly destructive maps. This one's a given. Apart from the Battlefield franchise, it is clear that no other game has come even remotely close to giving this sense of freedom while coursing through a map as the finals has. Whether breaking a wall with breachers to avoid finding the official door, mass destroying entire buildings to force a team's well-prepared defenses to crumble before their eyes, or just the pure pleasure of chaos, the finals has brought the bar to new heights on the matter. Other games will have to learn from this experience if they do not want to risk being left in the dirt. Clear separation between all builds. While we did agree that some of the builds need buffs, nerfs, or even overall reworks, it is very interesting to have an FPS game with such clear distinctions between each class and what they bring to the table. Embark needs to capitalize further on this aspect of their game and empower each player on different levels to force teamwork combinations. This will be a hard mission. They need to slalom carefully between balancing the power of each class without rendering each of them boring. Weekly updates. Nothing gives a game a kick better than an update, let alone a weekly update. This is something that Embark has handled extremely well since the release of their game, and that should not stop under any circumstances. Some game events might feel a little light in changes in comparison to normal modes because of the short time they have to work on them, but they do bring a sense of life being injected in the game week on week. This should be a market standard, but suddenly isn't at all. Do not forget to thank the developers if you ever have the chance to. Special events. In close link with the previous point, Embark has released short-time events with short-time contrast and short-time accessible loot linked to those contracts periodically. Whether you enjoy these modes or not, they are a very good way to give a breath of fresh air to the seasons and avoid feeling like we are on repeat for everything throughout the entire season. On top of that, these modes are usually built with access to a limited amount of guns, gadgets, or builds overall. This forces each player to ramp up their skills as they will have to touch two sides of the game they might not always go for normally. Developers listen to their community. In the world of cyberpunk-type releases or Diablo's $100 in-game skin purchases, it sometimes feels like the voice of the players is relayed to the 10th layer. Embark has seemingly decided to reverse the mechanics and put us at the center of the development of their game. With the weekly updates, devs seem to be actively listening to player feedback and in-game statistics to balance things out and decide where to put their focus. We might yet lack a certain level of clarity, but we cannot ignore the fact that for a game of that size, they are obviously trying very hard to keep everyone content. Highly customizable character and loadout. FPS games have a tendency to lack the possibility to personalize their characters. While not being on par with role-playing games, TheFinals has brought a fresh sense of cosmetics to the genre without falling into the typical cartoonish approach that we see repeatedly on other games. If they manage to maintain this approach in the coming seasons, this should help players get a feeling of having a unique experience with their own character, which in turn should help them stay active on the game. Traps and trap mentality. Traps have always existed to some extent in this genre, but TheFinals seems to have the intent of putting traps at the core of the gameplay. After an entire season of adapting to these traps, finding workarounds for each of them, and learning to utilize them properly, I think it is clear that this is a whole lot of fun. Let us hope that Embark brings even more diversity to all types of builds, to keep increasing the complexity of attacks and bring defenses to new heights. So there it is. I've shared my point of view and the views of those I managed to gather feedback from as best I could. Let me know if I forgot anything, and don't hesitate to let me know in the comments what changes you'd love to see for Season 2 and the future of TheFinals. If you did enjoy the video, don't forget to subscribe to show your support. Thank you for watching. I will see you on the next one.